On whom should such a divine presence rest, he says? On stones, on nothing, on sticks. There's nothing there. So the redemption of our souls, which is supposed to be in some sense involved in this, that's what they believe. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, that's their belief. You know, we must have a number of people to go back, and he quotes biblical passages over and over and again because he's a rabbinic person and he's a Sephardi. Very much attached, you see, to the Bible. He's not affected by these, you know, reform movements, historical schools, all this other stuff, just pure Orthodox Judaism. We are therefore commanded not to attempt to go at once and all together to the Holy Land. That's what Herzl was going to say. You know, we can't all go at once. There's no sustenance there. We must remain in the dispersion so that they can help the first settlers go. And that's what Herzl, this is all what you'll find in the Jewish State by Herzl, written in 1896. So I guess, well, I guess it's 60 years later. See, there are two kinds, if you like, redemption or return. The return is basically considered by these religious people synonymous with the redemption. Individual and collective. Individual return means each man, like the Muslims say, jihad means you should fight for your, you know, soul to be more righteous. But that's not what jihad really means to the Muslim community. That's really papering it over. Jihad means holy war against non-Muslims. Everybody knows that. So anyway, he's saying that there's an individual redemption and there's a collective. I don't believe, I think he's being kind there. I don't think he really believes that. But anyway, that's what he's saying. Collective return means, I don't think most Jews think return means, you know, go to, you know, repentance, remission of sins, John the Baptist, and so on. Collective means that all Israel should return to the land, which is the inheritance of our fathers. Here you go. It gives you the answer you were asking me. To receive the divine command, except that's what we're reading this from. So you can see what that means. The yoke of heaven. The collective return was foretold by all the prophets, even though we were unworthy. And that's true. Ezekiel says, I'm not doing this for your sake. I'm doing it, Ezekiel 37, 38, some of those glorious passages ever written by any poetic prophet. I'm doing this for the sake of my great name, so the nations will know that I am, you know, so on and so forth. I personally love those passages in Ezekiel. I think they're marvelous. It's not for your sake that I'm doing this. You know, I know you're unworthy. No, that's not why I'm doing this. I want the nations to know, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I keep my promises and so on and so forth. And that's what he's reflecting here. See, he's thinking that all from Ezekiel. And the Dead Sea Scrolls are like that too. In the Damascus document, you see there is a form of grace, Pauline grace, you know. Paul speaking about grace, you know, I forget how he puts it, but it's not that you deserve this, but grace and so on. Well, in the Damascus document, it say, because of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the ancestors, my promises to them, you're not worthy. I'm going to do these things for you, and so on. You just have to read. I can't get the passages now out of my mind quickly, but it's all in there in that Damascus document, the same ideas. These divisions, this is speaking about the redemption here, whatever that means to him. They've allowed the holy tongue to be forgotten. People don't know Hebrew anymore. They don't speak Hebrew. They don't write it. They don't understand it. Only the rabbis know it a bit because they study it their whole lives, and the average Jew knows nothing. Well, the average Jew knows he can pray and do things like that, but he can't really do a lot in the Hebrew language. But this cannot be accomplished by a miracle, a problem of this kind. And then he keeps quoting with the Bible here. So this is very biblical, even more than any westernized Jewish person. You see how different the Sephardis are. They're all biblically oriented, which is really interesting. The redemption will begin with efforts by the Jews themselves. They must organize, unite, choose leaders, leave the lands, and since no community can exist without a governing body, you know, we will have to appoint elders and so on and so forth. This is where they got, you see, the protocols of the elders of Zion from. You know, that whole plot idea that the Russian secret police figured out. Oh, okay, the Jews are plotting to return to Zion or something like that. So they're really, you know, plotting against the whole world and so on and so forth and so on. all these guys are saying, hey, we need an organization to affect this. We can't just, people can't just go on their own in any great numbers, you know. They're talking about an organization to affect their exodus. They're getting out of this mess in Europe. And the Russians, secret police figured, oh, well, you know, since a lot of Jews are socialists and against the Tsar, we'll just turn it all around and we'll fix them good. And so they did. So they did, and it's still happening. Is what is meant by the promise to us of the, anyway, these elders should be chosen by our greatest magnets, our financiers, the organization of an international Jewish body. That's what Herzl does. He creates what's called the Jewish Agency, which is the body that will be in charge of affecting the leaving. Well, you see, the Jews are much better organized, if you like, than the Arabs in this regard, and so of course the Arabs feel badly done by, because the organization of the Jews, you know, is constantly being pointed up to them when you see all their selfish behavior patterns, with oil being used for, you know, prospering one country and not relieving the poverty of another. I mean, I just saw something about Libya. Someone visited Libya with huge amounts of oil revenues. The roads aren't even fixed there. There's garbage everywhere. There's huge amounts of poor people. Okay, Dubai and countries like that are upgrading the whole population, but a lot of these countries don't even do that. You know, the Iranians, all they're doing with their money is buying weaponry. You know, they're not alleviating anything except buying weaponry and encouraging, you know, issues everywhere else, which is a serious matter. So, you know, people envy other people who try to get things together and are to some extent effective. I don't think that all Jews were involved in this by any means, but Herzl did bring into being this Jewish agency, is what it was called. And, you know, Hitler used to go to Zionist meetings in Vienna. He used to attend and listen to the lectures there when he was an art student in Vienna. He knew what was, you know, what he was working with and, you know, exploiting. I don't think the Jews understood that this was going to have the effect that it had on some of these twisted people. It is not impossible for us to carry out the commandment to return to the Holy Land. The Sultan will not object. You see, this is a Sephardi Jew who knows the Sultan because he knows the Ottoman Empire. You know, Yugoslavia was under the Ottoman Empire. The Sultan will not object, for His Majesty knows that Jews are his loyal subjects. You see, he has no regard for the Sultan because he's living in the Ottoman Empire. The Balkans were still part of the Ottoman Empire. Difference of religion should not be an obstacle for each nation. Will worship its own